A few days ago, I broke down the mathematically hardest rebuilds in College Football 27, and today I'm breaking down the Power 4 conference rebuilds that are going to be the hardest for you all to complete. If you want to see the hardest in all the game, go ahead and check out the video in the top right hand corner after this one. But today I use a combination of factors from NIL to school demeanor and other things to calculate the hardest rebuilds in the Power 4 conferences for you all to use in your next dynasty. So let's go ahead and jump straight into it. This year, EA actually included a difficulty ranking for each team when you start the game, and this is a decent surface level notation that relies heavily on the new school demeanor feature, but I have created my own formula that compares all the teams in the game and weights each criteria a little differently to give a better assessment of the difficulty to play with each team. With that in mind, the criteria is as follows. First, we assess the overall variance between the team we are looking at and their conference opponents since you play the majority of the games against them. Next, we look at the pipelines of each school, and with the help of the Zinke ranking, we divvy out points accordingly. Thirdly, we look at the new Dynasty point feature and split this into a total points available, and then also compare that to their conference opponents. And this is the same reason as we compare the overall, since you play most of your games in a season against these opponents. And since Champ Contender Grade is such an influential thing in recruiting, this will give us a good generic overview of that metric. Lastly, we assess all of the school grades that aren't stagnant or change very slowly, since things like coach prestige and loyalty and pro potential are extremely variable between teams. I have put the weight of each category on screen if you're interested, but if you have any questions, let me know them down below and I'll do my best to answer them at some point over the next few days. But before we get into the top 10, I want to give you all the next 5 teams who fell right outside of it. From 15 to 11, we have North Carolina, Vanderbilt, Arizona, Houston, and Boston College. I have also put their scores on screen, and to give you a little bit of an idea of how close they came to the actual top hardest rebuilds, keep in mind that the 15th ranked team in the game has a rebuild score of like 149-ish, which was Delaware. So these are way easier than the actual hardest ones, but they are still very challenging, mostly because the gameplay is going to be a little harder when you face some of the best teams in the game for the most part of your schedule. So starting us off in the 10th spot, we actually have my alma mater, the Kentucky Wildcats. While it pains me to see them here, I do think we have a really good shot IRL to be better than most think. But in College Football 27, they are pretty bad off. They do have the highest total NIL on this list, but they also have the 4th highest NIL variance to the average of their conference mates, with nearly 4,000 dynasty points missing, which gives them the max score in this ranking. They also have a really high overall variance, so each of your 9 conference games will be a massive beatdown, and you also have to play Louisville, another power program, every single season. But at least you will get a little bit more leash as your school demeanor is rated as a balance, which is the second to lowest grade. Next up, we have the Maryland Terrapins at the 9th spot, which seems like an obvious spot for them. With only 3,650 dynasty points and the variance once again being in the 4,000s, this East Coast marker of the Big Ten will have a hard march at Indianapolis anytime soon. But with a weaker bottom half of their conference, they can still put up a fair amount of wins and maybe sneak some 8-win seasons if the schedule plays in your favor, which can go a long way in keeping your players from year to year, which makes the rebuilds this year extremely hard. In the 8th spot, we have another SEC team, and this time it's the Mississippi State Bulldogs. Similarly to Kentucky, they have a solid amount of dynasty points, but have a really tough time matching up to their conference opponents. On a good note though, the pipelines for the Bulldogs are actually extremely solid and may be one of the best on this list. They have a tier 5 pipeline in Mississippi that could be a big factor in pulling some recruits, especially with that proximity to home grade being so massive in recruiting. They could be a team that gets to the middle of the SEC very quickly, but it's still going to be a hard road to the top. At the lucky 7th spot, we have the UCF Knights. At first glance, I was a bit surprised to have a Big 12 team so highly rated, but looking closer, it makes some sense. They have less than 3,000 dynasty points, which is tied for the lowest ranking on the list. They also have some mediocre pipeline tiers, with their highest being a tier 3 in South and Central Florida, which will get you pretty much nothing when other universities in the state all have tier 5s. Other than all the bad, you do have a good overall variance in the conference, and your NIL variance isn't as bad as others on this list, so getting to the top of the Big 12 may be a quick speed run, but winning it all is going to be a different story. Our last team before the top 5 is the Northwestern Wildcats, and they're the second Big Ten team here. Coming in a notch below Maryland in the dynasty points category, they will be able to sign some decent players in the Midwest, and with EA finally fixing the Illinois pipeline, it should be a bit easier in the years past. But your current state of affairs is pretty abysmal, as you are a top 3 in overall variance in the whole game, which is a whopping 7 overall points to the league average, so every game is going to feel like an uphill battle. Before we get to the top 5, be sure you hit that subscribe button down below so you can stay up to date on all things college football 27. We have a ton of great content for you all playing this year, and I'm super excited for you all to enjoy that. Also, if I could ask you for one more thing, be sure to hit that hype button below if you're on mobile. It helps us grow since we're such a small channel, and I would be super grateful. But anyways, let's get back to this top 5. Breaking into our top 5, we have our first ACC member of the top 10, and that's the Demon Deacons of Wake Forest. Dynasty points is the major issue once again, but even their overall variance couldn't save them this time, as they have a top 20 differential in the game, even in a weaker conference like the ACC. Pipelines are pretty solid, but not great, and luckily the school demeanor is at the lowest rating, so you can have many years to run some trial and error before they kick you out the door. The Cincinnati Bearcats hit the 4 line, just barely beating out the Deacons, but like all the other Big 12 teams, we have mediocre NIL and school grades, but worst of all, they have one of the lowest rated athletic facilities on the list, and that will be a major hurdle you have to overcome quickly, because they routinely have an athletic director contract requirement to upgrade it within a few seasons, which will run you over half of your starting dynasty points, which basically takes you out of recruiting any top talent for a full season. Hitting the bronze medal spot on the podium of our list, we have the Scarlet Knights out of the Big Ten. Similar to the Bearcats, they routinely need to upgrade their facilities since they are at a measly C+ to start the dynasty, but they are a little more flush with dynasty points, which can save you a little bit of a headache. But on the field, they rank in the top 5 for overall variance with a solid 6-point difference from their conference average. So even upgrading your facilities may not do you any favors to keep your players from hitting the transfer portal in the end. At the 2 spot is the little brother of all little brothers, and that is the Purdue Boilermakers. Purdue is all about smarts, so maybe they will find a way out of the bottom tier of the Big Ten eventually, but for now, they are still pretty bad. They have only 3,400 NIL points, which isn't the lowest by any means, but again, they are rated lower than nearly all the teams in their conference and have miserable pipelines to really drive the nail home. One thing that is more interesting than them than some other schools on this list is that they have a mission to beat Indiana every year, and not doing so gets you the biggest hot seat boost in the game. So good luck with trying to complete that mission any of your first few seasons. Finally, at the top spot for the hardest P4 rebuild in college football 27 is the Kansas Jayhawks. They have been at the top of our list for back-to-back seasons, and this year it doesn't get any easier with the lowest NIL of any Power 4 team, horrible pipelines with none above a tier 2, and a really bad overall variance and possibly the worst Power 4 conference. It's easy to see why they end up here. They also have the impatient school demeanor, so you are going to likely be on the hot seat as soon as you lose your first game, and you might be fired after your first year. Ironically enough, they do have a pretty solid facilities grade, so if you can last at least a season or two, you will get some good boost to your player dev and keeping some players around from the transfer portal. And they also have one of my personal favorite playbooks with a spread option typing if that's what you're into. And if you're curious about other playbooks that fit different playstyles, check out the video in the top right hand corner. But anyways, let's finish this video up. But with that, those are our top 10 hardest power teams to rebuild this year. With so many new bugs and issues on the game, I'm sure you will find these harder than years past. But let me know in the comments who you all think the hardest is. I appreciate y'all being here, and I hope y'all enjoyed. And as always, I'll catch you all in the next one.